So, I thought, great, I can fool this kid and he's gonna buy this car. Welcome to Car Stories with Matt. When I was 17, I was working in an auto body shop with another young guy, and he daily drove a 97 Pontiac Grand Am GT. It was a 5-speed, 2-door, black on black. Quite a rare car, and he had all the blacked out lights and everything on it, so it looked pretty sinister. And we actually used to race leaving work all the time. I had my 73 Comet back then, and we'd kind of race on the way home. We lived in similar areas of town and stuff, and normally I could keep up with him on the straights, but when he went around the corner, I'd normally slide off trying to keep up with him. And anyways, I thought his car was pretty cool, and I decided I wanted something like it myself. And he had actually gotten the car as a total loss vehicle. It had been in a really bad accident, and he bought it in crash condition and rebuilt the car and put it through the inspections and got it back on the road legally. And so I thought that was really interesting. As a young body guy, I figured that would be a fun project to try. And so I went shopping for my own crashed car to rebuild. And so I ended up at SGI Salvage Yard in Saskatoon on Miller Avenue. They have like a big compound there. That's SGI is Saskatchewan Government Insurance. That's the insurance, that's where you buy your car insurance in Saskatchewan, and it's through the government. So they have a bunch of these crash cars that they sell at auctions, but they also, at least then, they had a yard full of them that were for sale for fixed amounts of money, and you could even negotiate on them. So basically you'd go into the office there, and they'd have a sheet. It'd be several pages long. They had, like 100 cars out there at any given time, and they'd all have a unit number on them, and it would be marked on the sheet, and then you could find out how much they wanted for that vehicle. And so all the keys were, like on a cable around the steering column in the ignition, so you could start them up, but that's all you could do. You could start them up and you could look them over. And so I went out in the yard and found this 97 Sunfire, black on black, 5-speed. It was just a SE, like the 2.2 liter, but it had the 7-spoke alloy wheel options and air conditioning, and it was a pretty cool car. It was kind of exactly what I was looking for a rebuild project, because I thought with the Sunfires being really common, it would be easy to source some used parts and get it back on the road quite cheaply. So I had $1,300 cash that I had saved to buy this with, and that Sunfire, they wanted $1,500 on the sheet. So I went into the office there and I told the guy that I had $1,300 cash, so if they could do $1,300 all in with taxes included, I'd buy that car off them. So he accepted that offer. The car was mine, and then I just had to get it home. It wasn't drivable by any means. It was a hard front hit, and the frame rails were badly bent. The radiator was punctured, that sort of thing. So we actually rented a trailer. Me and my dad went up with a little 88 Nissan truck that we've always had in the family, and it was probably a little bit heavy of a load, but that's what we did. That little truck would really pull. So we got the car home, no incidents or anything, and right away I tore it down and found out that the damage was quite a bit worse than I thought, and that's often the case with crashed cars. So the frame rails were bent like 45 degrees this way, and then on one side it was pushed way up and the other side was pushed way down. And I concluded from the damage and from the rubber marking on the front bumper cover that came with it that was completely smashed, that it had actually probably T-boned a semi at speed and hit it right in the tires, right in the duals. So, you know, it was pretty messed up, and I was probably a little over my head, but I actually did tackle it just in the driveway. I blocked up all the wheels and basically, you know, locked up the brakes and everything and got it so the car wouldn't move around too much, and then just hooked chains onto the frame rails and heated them up a little bit with a propane torch and pulled on it with a little 88 Nissan truck, and actually got the frame rails you know, true this way, like pointing ahead again properly, and then I used big long bars and hammers and whatever I had to kind of manipulate them back into position beyond that. And then I did purchase a parts car. I actually remember driving out to the middle of nowhere to this farm to look at this 96 Sunfire that had been rear-ended, and bought that whole car for I think $600, and then we went back about a week later and picked it up with the 88 Nissan and rented tow dolly. So we got that car back home. That gave me all the front end parts that I needed, plus I was able to measure off of the framework on that and you know, align my front end perfectly according to that, because that car had never been hit on the front. I did all that and basically got the car pieced back together, and then I had to bring it through a salvage inspection, which is a really rigid inspection, and it cost about $350. Prior to doing that, the car actually sat around for quite a bit in an almost finished state. There was like a couple little things I had to do prior to this inspection, and so there was a few times when I really needed a car, you know, my other car would have an issue or whatever, and so I actually drove that car to work a few times. And I remember driving it to work before I replaced the airbags and the windshield even. I drove it to work with the bashed out windshield and the airbags hanging out and everything. The inspection was like 15 pages long, and they just, you know, nitpicked every aspect of the car. The funny part of it was when I went to the inspection, right when I was going there, I was doing like some last minute stuff and aligning the hood, and one of the like the threaded inserts broke off inside the hood for the hood hinge when I was trying to align it. And so I knew it wasn't going to pass the inspection with a missing bolt there, and we were like heading out the door. I didn't have time to weld a nut in there or anything. So what I did is I took like one of those little tin retainer clips and I slid up under between the hinge and the inside the hood, and then I pushed the hood bolt up through that just so that there was a bolt there. And so on the way up in this car, on the way to the inspection, every time I would pass like a big semi or whatever, the corner of my hood would actually lift. It looked like it was going to rip off, and but they never noticed that during the inspection. They actually, when they lifted the hood up, you could hear the nut insert drop down inside the hood, and they're like, "Oh, you must have a rock in your hood." And I'm like, "Yeah, that must be what it is." And actually, by the time all was said and done, unfortunately, I had spent quite a bit more than I planned, and I was into the car for around $5,000. And at the time, a car like that was selling for $7,000 to $8,000. So it didn't seem like I was too bad, but you know, the car wasn't perfect still. There was I hadn't like completely repainted it or anything, so there was some paint defects in it and a few things like that, and I hadn't bothered putting the air conditioning system back. I actually just deleted the air conditioning system, so that devalued it, and then, you know, a written off title devalues the car automatically as well. So it had all that against it, and then unfortunately it turned out I didn't like the car. Like, I had never driven a Sunfire prior to buying the wreck. And so when I got it all on the road and started using it daily, I hated it. Like it was uncomfortable, everything rattled in it, and it wasn't long before my aggressive driving style caught up to it, and I blew the head gasket, and I ruined the synchro mesh and a couple gears of the transmission, and the car was just basically falling apart around me. So I decided to part ways with it, and I actually bought a '92 Crown Victoria to replace it with a Interceptor package in it, and that was a whole other story. That was a fun car, and of course it held up a lot better to my driving. But I had to sell this Sunfire, which looked kind of flashy. I'd actually added some orange racing stripes to it with the leftover paint from painting my Chevette and stuff. So I put it for sale, and it had new tires on it, new brakes on it, a bunch of bonuses, and I was actually including the all the parts from the parts car that I had, which included a good low mileage engine and transmission. So technically I was giving everything you would have needed to fix this car up and get it running good again. But I did fail to disclose that the car really had any mechanical issues in the ad. I'm not terribly proud of that, but I had spent an awful lot of money on the car, and I knew it was going to be a challenge to recuperate it. So what I did is I priced the car around $2,700. So I mean literally like half of what I had into the car. I had driven it for about a year, but I mean I had really beat on it too, and I had put a bunch of leak stop in the radiator to try and solve this head gasket issue. I was putting like a can of bars leak a week in it. I remember actually when I bought my '92 Crown Victoria, I tried to trade in the Sunfire on it, because that's normally what you do with a car that has issues. You unload it on a unsuspecting car lot because you know they're gonna rip you off on the deal anyways. Well, that was the same garage where I bought the bars leak to put in the car, so they were well aware that car had some issues, so they weren't willing to take it on trade. So I bought the Crown Vic outright, and then I had to sell this Sunfire. So I listed it in the newspaper, and as I said, I did a bad thing and I never disclosed the issues. And I actually took it up to the city, to Saskatoon, to sell it because most people weren't interested in driving an hour and a half just to look at a car. So what I did is I got together 3 or 4 potential buyers to meet me at specified times, like half an hour apart. And here's the really crooked thing I did is I had them meet me in an underground parking lot underneath some really noisy ventilation fans, and it was really dimly lit. So between the noisy fans and the dim lighting, it really they weren't able to really notice many of the defects with the car, was the plan. And so the first guy came along. He was an older guy. I think he was looking for a car for his son, and he definitely knew how to check over a car, and he was a nice guy. So I just sat there in the passenger seat, let him check the car, answered any questions he had, but he quickly twigged on to the fact that the car had some issues. He could tell that the gears were grinding when he was shifting, and it had a noise when you decelerate it, like the throw-out bearing in the clutch was going, and so on. It had a check engine light he was concerned about, and then he got out in the bright light and looked it over really close, and found that it had some body defects and stuff as well. And so that test drive ended rather quickly. He wasn't interested. But by the time we got back to the parking garage, there was a young guy, and he was my next appointment to look at the car, and he kind of had a punky look about him, you know, not to judge somebody on their looks, but he just did. So, you know, I thought, you know, great, I can, you know, I can fool this kid and he's gonna buy this car. So, what I did is, every time the car was about to make a noise, he was gonna shift and grind or whatever, I'd abruptly say something. And, you know, so he wouldn't be able to focus and notice that there was a noise, or so he wouldn't hear the noise. And basically did that through the whole test drive, just yattered on and on and on, and made it so he wasn't able to notice any of these issues with the car. And so we went back to the parking garage and struck a deal on it. He initially bartered me down to like $2,500, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know, I just want rid of it. And then I guess he saw that I, you know, was kind of desperate to sell it. So then he started to try and take advantage of that and get the car for, like, he was offering me like $2,250 for it then, after we already agreed on the $2,500. So I did let him have the car for a bit less. He took it for $2,300, and the way I saw it is, you know, I was offering him all the parts for free to fix the car. I was actually initially going to deliver those parts to him from the parts car, but he didn't seem interested in having them, and he lived a long ways out of the city, so I just let it go. I figured if he wanted them, he'd have to come pick them up. And I waited months and months and never did anything with them, and he never got back to me, never came and picked them up. So I don't know what became of the car. Maybe he crashed it before he noticed it had issues or something. But you know, it was out of my life, and I do feel kind of bad for doing that to somebody. I would never do that nowadays. Nowadays, if I sell a car, it's sold with full disclosure. This is just meant to be a truthful and entertaining story, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have yourself a great day.